Hello everyone, in this video we are going to cover the role of the board in the performance of the company and in the implementation of Code of Corporate Governance, which is the guidelines for the best practices. So mainly the topic covers about role of the overall board regarding accountability and performance, and further the topic would cover the role of individual committees like IA committee and like remuneration committee and like the role of the chairman of the board and the CEO of the company independently and things like that. So to start with it, what is the scope of the role of the board? King's report is the most famous report which provides us with a summary of what basically is the scope of overall role of the board. Number one, to define the purpose of the company. How is the company going to work? What is the purpose of our operations, whether it is profit maximization or it is wealth maximization, or is it being to grow the percentage in the market, or if it's a charitable organization, it's about more public expenditure, etc. So whether the company is following its main goals, its main purpose of being formed. Number two, to define the values by which the company will perform. For example, the board could have defined, since the board have an ideal board will have different directors, including non-executive directors, which might be independent. So it is quite possible that the directors have collectively defined certain values which will not be compromised on the performance of company. For example, health and safety of an organization. If the work has to be done on a tall building, so there should be certain precautionary measures in place which will ensure that the employees working for the organization will not suffer any major injuries. So to define the values by which the company will perform its daily duties. Thirdly, to identify the stakeholders who are relevant to the company, which is quite a common thing. Because stakeholders are usually automatically identified. All the persons connected with the company are the stakeholders. Develop a strategy to combine the interests of all these factors we have considered, and to ensure the implementation later on by having accountability of those charged with governance and performance of the operations. What is the role of chairman of the board in all these? Chairman is basically the leader of the board of directors. He is heading the board of directors and the main decision maker, or the coordinating person between all the directors. So, being the leader of the house, it is the chairman's responsibility to ensure that the board operates effectively and efficiently. It should the chairman should ensure proper regular attendance of all the members of the board in different meetings. It should ensure regular meetings on all the important matters, and it should ensure the regular attendance of all the directors in order to get a point of view while making any decision of all the directors, having their experienced inputs. And the chairman also decides the scope of those meetings and is responsible for ensuring that all these matters are discussed in full. If he doesn't ensure, what will happen? What will be the consequences? If he doesn't ensure that all matters are discussed fully with them, what happens ultimately is that if something is highlighted later, for example to different reports, or might be at the presentation of annual accounts, if something is highlighted, the board of directors confidence in the chairman might be lost, that he did not clarify the actual position of the company in front of all the directors. As a result of this, the chairman might be changed, or there could be deficit of trusts, there could be delays in the decisions, ultimately affecting the performance and profitability of the company. So it is the responsibility of chairman to make sure that all the matters are fully discussed. Keeping in view this, what is in contrast the role of the chief executive of the company? Who is the chief executive? Chief executive of the company is the person who is running all the operations of the company, who is basically running all the show in the company. Chairman is running the board, whereas the company's daily operations are approved, the strategies are implemented by the CEO, and he is the one who is keeping an eye, or who is making the executive management of the company accountable towards the board. So he is the bridge between the board and the executive management. So who is the chief executive? He is the leader of the executive team and responsible for day-to-day management. He, as well as attending the board meetings, the CEO will usually chair the management committee and executive committee, as we've discussed. So he will get the directions of the company from the board. He will be answerable to the board with respect to the performance and with the work he's doing, and according to the directions received from the board, he will translate all those requirements and implement all the strategies discussed to the management of the company, executive managers who are acting as an agent of the company, in light of the agency concept that we've discussed earlier. Now the next person is an important person in the board is the company secretary. Who is the company secretary? Company secretary is basically the chief administrative officer of the company, and he is appointed by the company's directors. His main work is to keep a record of all the board meetings, their minutes, their decisions, and their follow-up actions, and to reinforce the follow-up actions in the next meetings, and take the follow-up from the chief executive in those meetings, in the board meetings. Number one, the most important thing is of the company secretary is this. Further, the company secretaries are usually responsible for the filing of different legal documentation into the departments. So as a result, what we can see here is that he is legally responsible for acting on the company's behalf to address specific requirements written into the Companies Act. So therefore, the legal documentation requirements and duties include preparing and filing documents with Companies House each year, or whatever the name of certain body is in any other country. And the other work of important for the company secretary is that he is usually keeping the minutes of all board meetings, and in order to ensure that their follow-ups are discussed in every next meeting, to make sure that the company is following the direction it has been adhered to. These were the different type of people or the type of positions that we have discussed. Now we'll look at what are the attributes of the directors in the board. What should be the attributes, what should be the competencies and all that in the directors in order to ensure a smooth running and efficient running of the company. So in order to carry out effective scrutiny and an effective accountability and check on the performance, the directors need to have relevant experience in different industries, in the same industry as well as different industry, functionally and with respect to their overall governance. if they are not experienced, it would be quite an easy task for the management to conceal their errors, or if something is taking place, sort of frauds. If the directors are not competent in functional or governance areas, the management will easily manipulate the results. The directors would not be able to enforce or implement a strong control environment in order to have a strong control over their work, over their company, over its operations. And if they are weak, they do not have certain experience in the functional areas, they would not be able to achieve the desired results that are possible through an effective, accountable, and efficient working environment, because they would not be knowing how to achieve a desired result, since they will not be, for example, if the directors are not knowing the ground reality of a demand of certain product in the market, they will not be able to get the desired results from the sales director or from the sales head who is heading the sales department or the marketing department. They will be dependent on his researches instead of their own expert opinion. Therefore, the most important thing is their expertise functionally and governance wise. The board also needs to be a mix of expertise so that they can give an opinion, an independent opinion based on other industries as well, to improve their practices and have a varied experience. So as a result, there would be a balance between executive management and independent non-executive management. This is another point, that there should be a balance between executive management and independent non-executive directors. Why is this so? This is because the executive directors are usually involved in the operations of the company. Therefore, while presenting the reports and their works in the board of directors in front of the chairman, they would be highly likely to prevent their own working, and they would not like to point out a finger upon their working and operations. Therefore, an independent non-executive director is definitely important in the board, because he will be the person who will not be having any familiarity threat or self-review threat of his own working in the company. Therefore, he will be the one who will be independently pointing out the finger on any weakness identified. Therefore, the King report also stresses a strong importance of executive and independent non-executive directors. Further, it also gives an importance of having a good balance between demographic balance between the directors. One of the other committee is nomination committee. Nomination committee's major work is only to nominate the board and chairman of the board and these sort of things. Nomination committee is usually looking after different board appointments, and it makes different recommendations to the board regarding induction of a new director to have a new experience, and induction if the balance is getting out between executive and independent non-executive directors, or the skills are not getting varied. The nomination committee is basically looking after to keep a balance in the board overall, and to nominate or recommend new inductions and these sort of things in the board. Higgs report of UK stresses that it is responsibility both of the chairperson to decide what information should be made available, and of directors to satisfy themselves that they have appropriate information of sufficient quality to make sound judgments. If they do judge that they do not have sufficient information to make a sound judgment, they can demand more working from the management. So as we discussed earlier, that the chairman basically it is the chairman's responsibility to provide certain information. The chairman makes it done through the chief executive officer. However, the chairman makes sure that enough information has been presented according to all the decisions that are in pipeline. Otherwise, ultimately, it would result in a conflict of interest or conflict of trust between the chairman and the other board of directors. So therefore, it is his responsibility, number one. Number two, joint responsibility of directors as well, that in order to make a sound judgment, they can demand any further information that is required from the chairman and CEO. Now, how do we appraise the performance of the board? Basically, the appraisal of the board is an important control, because if there is no appraisal, the board will not be accountable. So therefore, Higgs report of UK also recommends that the performance should be assessed once a year. How can it be assessed? Number one, separate appraisal of chairman and chief executive should be done, and this should have a direct link with the remuneration process through the remuneration committee, because their remuneration should be dependent upon the performance. And an appraisal of board's performance should also be done once a year, which will include the overall goals or objectives made or created versus achieved. How can it be done? How can we appraise the performance of the board? Accountability and responsibility. These are the two major tools which should be in place and should be ensured in order to achieve the maximum result from the board of directors. Now, how are they accountable and responsible nowadays? Because the directors have to face legal actions, so they are more accountable for their actions, responsible to a wider range of stakeholders. How? Because if a company defaults, there are rules in place that in case of non-payment by the company, the director's personal belongings will also be challenged in the court of law. Number one. Number two, dismissals from the board. As service contracts are shorter in length, and directors must stand for re-election by the state shareholders regularly, at least yearly. Why? Because if the shareholders think that directors are not performing well and the shareholders are not getting enough out of their company, they can re-elect directors and chairmen with the power of their vote through their shares and change the directors. So dismissals, legal actions, they both are the part of accountability and responsibility, thereby resulting in a better performance of directors. The division of responsibilities we have already discussed in detail. That we have discussed in detail the roles of chairman and chief executive. How is it different? And also we have discussed the role of independent non-executive directors, how they have a key role in governance. Their number and their status should be balanced with the executive ones, so that their views can carry a significant weight. Who are non-executive directors? I did give you quite a detail about these. However, we can go through it again. Non-executive directors are the ones who are not employees of the company, but they do take part in the decision making. They do not take any part in day-to-day running of the company. However, there are certain problems associated with non-executive directors as well. Why? Because if they are not participants of day-to-day running and operations of the company, it is quite possible that they lose interest in the working of company. So it's quite a difficult thing to ensure their independence with their interest in the company. So this is one of the most difficult things. We'll also discuss the other problems later with the in the video. Other problems and benefits also, we will discuss both of them in this video later. However, the definition of non-executive directors include the persons who are not employees of the company and who do not take in day-to-day operations of the company. They should provide a balancing influence so that their point of view has a significant weightage, and they do play a key role in reducing conflict of interest between management and shareholders, since they are the independent ones. They do not have certain interest in either boards or shareholders, stakeholders, different interests. What is their role? The major role of non-executive directors: to ensure that the strategies are properly implemented, performance of the company is as per expected, risks are minimized because they need to ensure the security of shareholders' money and all the stakeholders' interests, and directors and managers do not have a conflict of interest. All these things are for the betterment of the company, which they need to ensure. That is why they are inducted in the board of directors. What benefits can we achieve through non-executive directors induction? Well, since they are independent, so one of the most important benefit is that an independent view is achieved. Number two, since they are not operationally active in this industry, that means they are working in some other industry. So therefore, we can achieve external experience and knowledge, and that can be inculcated in the performance of this company, resulting in a better control environment and a better performance environment in this company. They can, due to their external experience, they can provide a wider perspective than the executive directors, who are usually busy in day-to-day operations. Thirdly, we have just discussed earlier that good non-executive directors are often a comfort factor for third parties because of their independence. So they are usually the bridge between the conflict of interest of shareholders and management. Non-executive directors are full board members who are expected to have the level of knowledge that the full board membership implies. Now, what are the problems associated with non-executive directors? They lack independence. How? I told you it is very difficult to create an independent person not doing anything for the company and keeping an interest as well. So therefore they lack independence. Prejudice in certain companies, because once if an advantage is to have a varied knowledge and skill, the disadvantage is that they also could be prejudiced in certain companies because of their non-exposure to the current industry. Third problem with non-executive directors is usually because they are not operational, it is a difficult thing to impose their point of views. And therefore the limited time, because the re-election of directors takes place usually annually by the shareholders, and since they are not operational, they might be changed, so they have a limited time to work in an organization. These are the challenges or problems that can be associated with non-executive directors. What should be the number of non-executive directors? As per different reports, most Higgs, Cadbury and all reports, what they say is that they should be having sufficient character and number for their views to carry weight. That means usually they should be equal to the executive directors, so that their weight carries equal importance. Their opinion carries equal weight. What is the independence of non-executive director and how is it important? Well, the independence is that you should make sure that they have no business, financial or other connected with the company. We discussed it earlier. Why are they called independent non-executive directors? Because they do not have any connection with the company. That is why it gets sometimes difficult to keep their interest in the company. If the independence on one side of the coin is that independence of non-executive directors is a beneficial thing for the company as a result of their independent nature. They have no business or financial connection with the company. Therefore, their opinion would not be dependent upon the current performance of the company to defend their own performance. The disadvantage associated with this thing is that it's quite difficult to have interest building in the company if you have no connection. They should not take part in any share option schemes. To remain independent, appointments should be for a specified term, because otherwise they will start becoming a part of the family and become dependent. We have discussed this point earlier as well. Procedures should exist whereby non-executive directors may take independent advice from any stakeholder, from inquiries and etc. So now other committees include, we have discussed via name, remuneration, nomination, audit and risk committees. Remuneration committee decides the director's remuneration. Audit committee usually is independent, who is conducting the internal audits and looking after the control environment of the company. And it is to be noted that the audit committee should not be reporting to CEO, because CEO is the person who is running day-to-day operations, and therefore the audit committee's finding will be directly conflicting with the CEO's performance. Therefore, the audit committee should be reporting directly to board, and an internal audit head should also not be reporting to the CEO. He should also be reporting directly to the audit committee and risk committees. So director's remuneration should be set by remuneration committee. Its major work is to keep a check on the director's remuneration according to their performance, and the remuneration committee should be consisting of independent non-executive directors, so that the decision made by them seems impartial. Remuneration should be dependent on the performance, and accounts should disclose all the remuneration policy in detail for the packages of directors. These are the standing committees usually in the company's: remuneration, audit, nominations, risk committee. We have discussed all the functions of these committees, and I think the overall board sums up with this slide, and there's nothing more with respect to the performance and role of board. So I think that is it for today, for this video. In the next video, we will be covering reporting on the corporate governance. Till that time, thank you very much. Goodbye. Take care.